Imagine this: weeks of silence, you finally detach, you start breathing again, and then your phone lights up. Can we talk? And your heart races because it's the return you wanted, but it comes with fear because you remember the pattern. Today, I'm going to help you handle their comeback with power, not pain. When they show up again, broken, regretful, and begging, your heart will try to translate it into one sentence. See, I mattered. And I need you to breathe right there because you did not suddenly become valuable today. You were valuable the entire time. You were not a prize they finally earned. You were a person they failed to protect. And the fact that they returned does not rewrite what you lived through. Their return is not your validation. It is simply the moment their avoidance ran out of road, and the silence they kept running into started speaking your name louder than any new distraction ever could. Because here's what often happens: you felt the loss immediately. You felt it in your chest, in your appetite, in your sleep, in the way you stared at your phone and tried to act normal. You tried to understand how someone could hold your hand one day and feel distant the next, how they could say they cared and then disappear right when closeness asked for courage. You grieved in real time. You mourned the future you pictured. You questioned yourself. You replayed conversations. You wondered if you were too much, too emotional, too needy, too intense, when deep down all you wanted was basic reassurance and consistency, the kind of love that doesn't punish you for having a heart. But they didn't grieve like you did, not at first. They ran, they minimized, they distracted, they told themselves they were fine. They replaced feeling with distance, and distance with control, and control with the illusion of peace. They didn't miss you the way you missed them, because missing you would have meant facing themselves. It would have meant admitting they were the one who walked away from something real, and that truth is heavy for someone who has spent a lifetime surviving by shutting down. So in the beginning, your absence felt to them like relief, not because you were a burden, but because intimacy was. Real love requires presence, accountability, and emotional stamina. And when someone's nervous system is wired to see closeness as danger, they don't experience love as comfort. They experience it as exposure. And exposure scares them. It scares them because love invites them to be seen. And being seen invites the risk of being disappointed, rejected, or not enough. And they would rather leave first than stay and possibly fail. That is why their return can feel so confusing to you, because part of you thinks, if they can come back now, why couldn't they stay then? If they can beg now, why did they act cold when you were crying? If they can regret now, why did they ignore you when you were trying to fix it? And the answer is painful, but it's also freeing. They didn't come back because you finally proved something. They came back because the emotional bill arrived, and for once, they couldn't avoid paying it. Time is the thing that catches up with avoidant behavior because running delays pain, it doesn't delete it. At first, they fill the space with noise, with work, with friends, with flirting, with anything that keeps them from sitting still long enough to feel. But eventually, the distractions stop working. Eventually, they have that quiet moment, the one you've had 1,000 times, where the room is still, the phone is silent, and the truth finally has the volume to be heard. And in that moment, they realize something that you already knew. You weren't just someone, you were safety, you were warmth, you were a soft place to land, and the reason it felt so intense is because it was real. And when they reach out, it can sound like humility, but you need to understand what it might actually be. It might be the first honest crack in their armor, it might be a genuine awakening, or it might simply be panic. Panic that the one person who loved them through their shutdowns is no longer available to do that anymore. And your heart, because it's tender and loyal, will want to assume the best. Your heart will want to run toward the version of them you always believed was in there. The version you defended, the version you waited for, the version you hoped would finally choose you fully. But listen closely, because this is where your healing either becomes real or it becomes another loop. Their return is not the finish line, it is the test. It is the moment you decide whether you will betray yourself again just to feel chosen for a few days. It is the moment you decide whether love will be measured by words or by patterns. It is the moment you remember that being missed is not the same as being valued, and being begged for is not the same as being kept. You can acknowledge their regret without turning it into your responsibility. You can hear their apology without letting it erase the past. You can care without collapsing, because the truth is, you can be the most loving person in the world and still not be safe in the hands of someone who hasn't learned how to hold love without running. And you don't owe anyone your heart as a reward for realizing they lost it. So when they show up again, do not rush to comfort them. Do not rush to explain yourself. Do not rush to prove you're still the same open door. Pause, breathe, feel what you feel, and then let your standards speak for you. You don't have to be cruel. You don't have to punish. You don't have to perform strength like a weapon. You just have to be clear. Because clarity is what healed people choose. Clarity sounds like, I hear you, but I won't go back to confusion. Clarity sounds like, I'm open to seeing change, but I'm not open to repeating pain. Clarity sounds like, if you want to be in my life, you will show up consistently, not just intensely. You will communicate, not disappear. You will take accountability, not make excuses. You will repair, not just regret. And if they really have changed, they won't demand instant access to you. They won't pressure you to move on. They won't guilt you for having boundaries. They will respect the pace your nervous system needs. They will understand that trust is rebuilt through time, not through one emotional conversation. They will show you the kind of love that doesn't only appear when they're scared of losing you, but the kind that stays when it's ordinary, when it's boring, when it's vulnerable, when it requires effort. And if they haven't changed, your boundary will reveal it quickly. Because people who return for comfort hate boundaries. They want the reward without the work. They want the warmth without the responsibility. They want your softness, but they don't want to become safe. And you will feel it. You will feel the same familiar pressure, the same vague promises, the same impatience, the same attempt to pull you back into the old dynamic where you carry the emotional labor and call it love. This is why their return is not your validation. It is your invitation, an invitation to choose yourself, to protect the heart that begged quietly for peace, to honor the version of you that stayed up late wondering what you did wrong. You didn't do it wrong. You just loved someone who wasn't ready to meet you where you were. And if they are ready now, they will meet you with consistency, not just emotion. So let their regret be real and still remember your worth was never dependent on it. Let their begging be loud and still remember your peace is louder. Let their return be a moment, not a miracle. Because the miracle is you, the way you survived the silence, the way you didn't become bitter, the way you kept your heart alive, the way you learned that love is not supposed to feel like begging to be chosen, and whether they stay or leave, you will not abandon yourself again. When someone comes back to you full of regret, with shaky words, wet eyes, and a voice that sounds like it finally understands what it lost, your heart can start trembling like it's hearing the ending it always prayed for. Because deep down, you didn't just want them to return, you wanted the pain to mean something. You wanted the sleepless nights to be redeemed. You wanted the silence to be explained. You wanted the love you gave to finally be recognized. And in that moment, regret can feel like proof, like closure, like justice, like the universe finally saying, you were not crazy for caring this much. But you need to understand something with all the tenderness in the world. Regret is not the same as change. And if you don't learn that difference, you can end up handing your heart back to the same pattern that shattered it, just because the person finally learned how to cry about it. Because regret is an emotion, and emotions can be loud, dramatic, and convincing, especially when they arrive late. Regret can make someone text you at midnight, call you again and again, show up at your door, speak in paragraphs they never spoke before. Regret can make them promise therapy, promise communication, promise everything you begged for when you were still trying to hold the relationship together with your bare hands. Regret can sound like sincerity, and sometimes it is, But regret is still a feeling, and feelings rise and fall. Feelings spike during loneliness, fear, and loss, and then they soften when life gets comfortable again. That is why relying on regret is risky, because regret can disappear the moment the panic fades. Real change is not panic. Real change is not a sudden emotional speech. Real change is what someone does when the moment passes, when they're no longer scared, when they're no longer in danger of losing you, when you stop being a crisis and start being a commitment. Real change is what they do on an ordinary Tuesday when you express a need and it doesn't threaten them, it just requires them. Real change is staying, not returning. So when they come back and they say all the things you wanted, don't let your heart rush ahead of your life. Don't let the sweetness of apology erase the bitterness of the pattern. You can listen, you can feel, you can even cry because you're human and you loved. But you must also remember the truth you learned the hard way. Words are easy when someone is afraid. Consistency is hard when someone has to grow. A person can miss you deeply and still not be capable of loving you safely. A person can regret losing you and still not have the emotional skills to build something healthy. A person can feel shame and still avoid accountability. A person can beg and still run again the moment closeness returns. And this is the heartbreak of loving someone with avoidant patterns. Sometimes their love is real, but their capacity is not. Capacity is what matters. Capacity is the ability to stay present in discomfort. Capacity is the ability to have hard conversations without punishing you with silence. Capacity is the ability to repair after conflict instead of disappearing. Capacity is the ability to hold your emotions with care, not treat them like a threat. Capacity is the ability to love you in a way that doesn't make you feel like you're always one wrong sentence away from being abandoned. And regret alone does not create capacity. That's why you have to watch for the difference between an apology and accountability. An apology says, "I'm sorry, I miss you, I didn't mean it, I was overwhelmed." Accountability says, "I hurt you, I understand the impact, I see the pattern, and I'm doing the work to make sure it doesn't happen again." Accountability does not rush you. It doesn't demand trust. It doesn't ask you to forget. It doesn't get angry when you bring up the past. It respects your nervous system. It respects your pace. It respects the reality that you were harmed and that healing requires proof, not poetry. And here's a hard truth that your heart might resist. If someone truly changes, they will not use their regret to manipulate you. They will not say, "Don't you see how sorry I am? Why can't you just give me another chance?" They will not turn their tears into a tool. They will not punish you for having boundaries. They will not make you responsible for their healing. They will be willing to lose you if that is the consequence of what they did, because real accountability accepts consequences without demanding comfort. So if they come back crying, your softness might want to rescue them. Your empathy might want to hold their hand and tell them it's okay, but you need to be careful with that instinct because you can accidentally teach someone that they can break you and still be soothed by you. You can accidentally teach them that remorse is enough. You can accidentally replace their responsibility with your forgiveness, and you will end up back in the same loop, carrying the emotional weight while they carry the privilege of being loved. You don't have to become cold to protect yourself. You don't have to become cruel. You just have to become honest. Honest with them and honest with yourself. If they say, "I've changed," you can say, "I hope you have, but I will not be convinced by promises. I will be convinced by behavior." If they say, "I'm ready now," you can say, "Readiness looks like consistency, and consistency takes time." If they say, "I'll do anything," you can say, "Then show me slowly, respectfully, without pressure." Because the truth is, the relationship didn't break because they didn't love you. It broke because their coping style hurt you. It broke because they chose distance instead of communication. It broke because they made you feel like you were asking for too much when you were asking for something normal, emotional safety. It broke because you were left alone too many times, and loneliness inside a relationship is one of the most painful places a person can live. So if they return, the question isn't, do they regret it? The question is, Have they developed the tools to stop repeating it? Have they faced the fear that made them run? Have they learned how to regulate their emotions without shutting down? Have they learned how to speak truth instead of disappearing? Have they learned how to tolerate closeness without treating it like suffocation? Have they learned how to hold your needs without calling them pressure? Have they learned how to show love when it's inconvenient, not only when it's dramatic? Because this is what happens when regret is mistaken for change. You get a beautiful reunion, and then you get the same abandonment wearing a different outfit. You get intense attention, and then you get distance again. You get heartfelt messages, and then you get silence again. And the second time hurts more because you blame yourself for believing. So you protect yourself with time. Time is your truth teller. Time exposes whether their return was a moment of emotion or a movement toward growth. Time reveals whether they only want relief from guilt or they want responsibility for repair. Time shows whether they can stay present when you're not worshiping them, when you're not shrinking, when you're simply living as a full human being with needs, feelings, and boundaries. And yes, it is possible for someone to change, but the change is not proven by the intensity of their regret. It is proven by the steadiness of their actions. By therapy they actually attend, not just mention. By conversations they actually have, not just promise. By boundaries they actually respect, not just tolerate. By apologies they actually live, not just say. So let their regret touch your heart, but do not let it override your wisdom. Let it be something you witness, not something you build your life on, because you didn't survive all that silence just to walk back into it again. If they truly want you, they will rebuild slowly, patiently, consistently, and they will understand that love doesn't restart with a speech, it restarts with trust, and trust is built one choice at a time, over and over, until your nervous system finally believes, I am safe here. And if they can't do that, then their regret is simply the sound of a door closing behind them and your peace opening in front of you. If they come back, if they suddenly show up again with that familiar energy, softer now, more nervous, more careful, like someone who knows they're standing in front of the very thing they once took for granted, you will feel two truths at the same time. One truth will be your heart, the part of you that loved deeply, the part that still remembers the warmth, the laughter, the hope, the small moments that felt like home. The other truth will be your body, the part that remembers the confusion, the silence, the tightness in your chest, the nights you tried to be strong while you were quietly falling apart. And the hardest thing about this moment is that both truths are real. Because when an avoidant returns, they often return with intensity, they return with emotion, they return with urgency, and it can sound like a miracle. It can sound like the ending you begged for. It can sound like finally they get it. And if you're not careful, you will let emotion move faster than wisdom. You will let longing make decisions that your healed self would never make. So listen, not as a lecture, but as someone who wants your heart to finally rest. If they come back, they meet your standards, not your old pain. They do not get to enter your life through the same door they used to exit. They do not get to return and have you become small again, quiet again, accommodating again, endlessly understanding again, while they stay half present and call it love. They do not get to use your tenderness as a shortcut back to comfort. Because your pain deserves an upgrade. Your healing deserves structure. Your love deserves safety. And if someone wants access to you now, they must be willing to meet the version of you that has learned, not the version of you that begged, not the version of you that waited by the phone, not the version of you that tried to be easy so they wouldn't leave. The version of you now has standards, and standards are not walls, they are gates. They don't punish, they protect. They don't exist to control someone, they exist to keep you from losing yourself. And if someone truly loves you, they will not be offended by the gate. They will respect it. They will walk through it slowly, and they will understand why it had to be built in the first place. So if they come back, the first thing you do is stop confusing access with intimacy. Someone contacting you is not the same as someone committing to you. Someone being emotional is not the same as someone being consistent. Someone saying they've changed is not the same as someone proving they can stay. You don't restart the relationship because they feel regret. You restart trust because they show reliability. And reliability looks boring compared to begging. Reliability looks like regular communication, not dramatic apologies. Reliability looks like showing up when there's nothing to gain. Reliability looks like handling conflict without shutting down. Reliability looks like being accountable when they mess up, not disappearing and coming back with flowers and tears. Reliability looks like effort that continues after the reunion high fades. That is why you must move slowly, not because you are cold, not because you are playing games, but because you are finally honoring what you went through. You are not punishing them by taking your time, you are protecting yourself by letting time reveal the truth. Because time is where patterns show themselves, and patterns are what matter. If they say, I want you back, you can say, I hear you, but I will not rush. If they say, I'm different now, you can say, I'm open to seeing that, but I will only believe what I experience consistently. If they push, if they get impatient, if they act offended that you're not melting immediately, that is information, because someone who is truly changed will understand that trust is earned, not demanded. They will not try to skip the process just to feel secure again. And your standards have to be specific, not vague. Specific standards sound like, we don't do disappearing anymore. Specific standards sound like, if you need space, you communicate it clearly and kindly, and you give a time to reconnect. Specific standards sound like, we talk through conflict, we don't punish each other with silence. Specific standards sound like, we don't keep each other in uncertainty. Specific standards sound like, you don't get a relationship with me while acting like you're still deciding if you want one. This is the part where your old self might feel guilty, because your old self was trained to accept less and call it love. Your old self was trained to be grateful for crumbs, because crumbs felt better than nothing. Your old self was trained to believe that boundaries push people away, but your healed self knows this. Boundaries don't push away the right person, they reveal the wrong one. And yes, it will feel scary to hold your standards because you might still fear losing them. But you must remember the truth. You already lost yourself once trying to keep them. You already paid the price of shrinking. You already paid the price of over-explaining. You already paid the price of waiting. You are not paying that price again. If they want you now, they will meet you in clarity. They will meet you in effort. They will meet you in emotional responsibility. They will meet you in the reality of what they did without minimizing it. They will not say, why are you still stuck on the past? They will say, I understand why you're cautious, and I'm here to rebuild this properly. They will not say, trust me, they will say, watch me. Because the goal is not to make them prove their love through suffering. The goal is to make sure your nervous system never has to live in fear again. Your nervous system deserves steadiness. Your heart deserves predictability. Your life deserves peace. And peace does not come from promises, it comes from patterns that feel safe. So if they come back, you don't hand them the old version of you. You don't hand them instant access, instant closeness, instant forgiveness, instant emotional intimacy. You offer a path, and the path is built on time, communication, and consistency. You allow them to show you who they are now, not through a moment, but through months. You don't close your heart, but you don't leave it unguarded. And here's the deepest truth. The one that will set you free, you are not afraid they will leave. You are afraid you will go back to being the person who begged them not to. That's the real fear. Because the pain was not only losing them, the pain was losing your dignity in the process. So this time, you keep your dignity. You keep your standards. You keep your pace. You keep your power. Not power over them, power over your own life. You let them rise to meet you. And if they cannot, you let that be the answer without forcing your heart to carry another unfinished story. Because love that is real will not ask you to abandon yourself to receive it. Love that is real will not punish you for being careful. Love that is real will not demand you forget what you survived. Love that is real will build something new with you, something stable, something honest, something safe.